Welcome to Elevate Women in Tech podcast series. I'm Kelly Kwarteng, founder of Halzac and host of the Elevate Show. Our mission is to elevate women and girls in tech from the classroom to the boardroom. Today's episode is sponsored by BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. BCS is the professional body for the tech sector. They're on a mission to build a trusted profession that can steer technology on a safe path and take on big challenges facing the world today. They know that every time a girl drops computing at GCSE or a female worker switches her career in tech to another path, it's a major blow to the profession and our collective potential. That's why BCS is using the power of their global community to bring about real change, reaching out across diverse communities, addressing biases, celebrating role models, supporting skills development and career opportunities. When EDI in tech is the norm in every lecture theatre, dev team and board meeting, that's when we unlock a profession that takes us into a fairer digital future. If you're a student, teacher, working in tech or a leader in tech, join forces with BCS and let's make the vision a reality. To find out more about the work BCS is doing in the sector and how to join them on their mission, go to bcs.org/bringiton. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Women in Tech podcast series. Today we're speaking to Jenny Garrett-O'Geary, who will be sharing her insights and expertise on diversity, equity and inclusion for women in the technology industry. Thanks for joining us today, Jenny. I'm really excited to delve into our conversation today through your episode Beyond the Service, where we will discuss the broken role of women in tech leadership, why attraction is not enough and retention is key, how companies can go beyond box checking, and the importance of allyship. So thank you, first of all, for being with us today.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm really excited about our conversation.
I do with all my guests that come on board. So to kick start us off, if you could, Jenny, if you could give our listeners a brief background about yourself and the work that you do in the space.
Yeah, thanks so much. So for nearly 20 years, I've been running my business now. Prior to that, I worked in marketing and had my last role was a senior marketing role in a leading business school. I left there to start my own coaching business, which led into me developing leadership programs. And about 11 years ago now, I wrote a book called Rocking Your Role, which is a guide to success for female breadwinners, and started developing coaching programs and talks to support women and navigating work and life. When I looked out on audiences, I didn't always see people who look like me, the intersection of ethnicity, etc., or other characteristics such as people from the LGBTQ plus community. And I thought I wanted to make sure I spoke to a wider audience. And I started developing programs to help those from ethnically diverse backgrounds break through the glass ceiling and help everyone create environments where we all can thrive. And I ended up writing another book, Equality versus Equity, Tackling Issues of Race in the Workplace. Two other quick fun facts about me. I have a social enterprise called Rocking Your Teens that seeks to inspire teenagers and help them increase their aspirations. And I created the first and only coaching directory of executive coaches from ethnically diverse backgrounds, and we aim to connect them with corporates. Hope that gives you an overview.
What an overview that was as well. I mean, 20 years of working with your own business and your career before that. And I know we've spoke about Rocking Your Teen, and it sounds like a fantastic organisation and doing some great work, and 2 books as well. So yeah, lots of things there that our audience could go away and research a bit more about. But if they don't do anything else, I would highly recommend that they connect with you on LinkedIn, because your content on LinkedIn is absolutely amazing, and I think that's how we connected to be here today. So let's dive into the topic one of the topics that we spoke about today. So despite efforts towards gender parity, women remain significantly underrepresented in tech leadership roles. With women making up just 26% of tech workers and a mere 9% of tech leadership positions, there was a substantial gap that's needed to be addressed, which is often referred to as the broken rung. So from your perspective,
What are the most significant barriers preventing women from advancing into senior leadership positions like CTO and CIO, CISO, engineering manager, tech lead? What are you seeing that's holding women back?
Yes, I think there are many things that are holding women back. I think the lack of representation is a problem. We look up and we don't see people who look like us. We may think that we have to become, macho, etc., be someone else in order to be successful, and we're not willing to sacrifice ourselves and our authenticity to do that. I definitely, there was a generation before this one who I think often said we sacrificed certain elements of who we were to get on. And I think that women now aren't willing to do that. They'd rather stay where they are. So I think the lack of representation is a problem. I think that the microaggressions or the culture that we experience in our organizations is an issue as well. If you feel there's a double take when you walk into the room because people are not expecting you to be a woman, if you feel that people are speaking over you because even though you're the expert in the room, someone else is going to have a louder voice or feels they can talk on your topic, these things can really stop us moving forward. These little microaggressions that happen on a daily basis, they cut, they're those tiny paper cuts, they make a difference, and they make us very sore and we don't move forward. And I think that not just not having representation, but actually just generally not seeing anyone like you can create self-doubt. So it's like, why am I here? If I'm the only woman in this team, what's the reason for that? Am I going to be found out? Do I deserve to be in here? The critic in us comes out as well and can stop us going for those roles. It can keep us in a small box saying we're safe here. If I step out, who knows what I'll be exposed to? So I'll stay where I am, and we don't move on. But also, thinking about my social enterprise, Rocking Your Teens, are young women encouraged into these tech professions? I'm not sure they are. I have a 20-odd-year-old daughter, and I remember them not making it exciting for her, not making her think that she could take on these roles. I really used to take her to coding classes at the weekend, and I didn't succeed. She didn't go into tech, but at least she had someone pushing her, but not everyone has that. So I think we've got to make it really attractive for young women.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the representation piece, and that's something I am really active in the work that I try and do in the space, is really trying to fix that representation to really make people feel like they belong. So then, like you said, that self-doubt hopefully then starts to go away, because the more you see people that look like you, the more comfortable you feel to be there. And I was only reading a report from, I think it was PwC, and it was talking about the amount of girls at school age that are actually being presented with career opportunities within the tech sector, and the numbers were extremely low. I think it was like 16 or 17%, or it was a very low amount compared to their male counterparts, where it was substantially higher. So that stereotyping thing that happens earlier on, I think, is something you need to really overcome. So again, that representation comes through, and everything else is, like you said, the microaggressions. I know you talk a lot about this online as well. It causes a lot of damage, and I think people don't really realise the comments that they say, how, like I said, how deep they actually cut. In your experience, what practical steps can organisations take to repair this broken rung and create more equitable pathways for women to ascend into leadership roles within their own organisations? And what specific actions or initiatives have you found to be effective in this regard?
Yes, I think they say that men are recruited on potential, and women on track record. And I think that is a big issue. We have to sort of prove ourselves time and time again in order to move forward. And I think that's what needs to stop. I think you need to see the potential in women and give them an equal opportunity to be successful. And the people who need to see that potential are often senior leaders in the organization. I'm a big fan of sponsorship. Sponsorship happens informally in organizations all of the time. But if you think about who's sponsoring it, it's senior leaders. Typically, they're male. Typically, they're white. Of course, not always. And they recruit in their image. They recruit their sponsees in their image. Oh, you have the same hobbies as me, same interests. We've got some commonality. And so women or other minoritized groups don't get that sponsorship. And that sponsorship makes a big difference, because if someone's advocating for you in rooms that you're not in, there's going to be more opportunities coming your way. If more people know about who you are, when it comes to the interview, people are going to say, oh yeah, I know about her. Yes, I've heard about that person from them. Oh, let's give them a chance. But if you seem like, an anomaly, who is this person? What do they do? Etc. You're not going to get those opportunities. So for me, it's sponsorship is a big part of really us being able to jump over that broken rung and be able to be successful. So that's the first thing. But I think there are many other things, because we have to create environments where we appreciate difference. And so often we're creating environments where we're saying, fit in or you're not going to succeed. Be the same as everyone else or you're not going to succeed. And I'm not saying that all women think in the same way, because we don't. But actually, what do your female colleagues bring that perhaps your male counterparts don't? What's the difference in their thinking, in their way of doing their work, in their engagement? How do they help you make sure that you don't miss out a big part of your target audience by not thinking about what they might need? And I think that appreciation of the fact that people can bring something very different and that is helpful, rather than people are bringing something different, let's try and make them assimilate and be the same as everyone else. So that appreciation of difference is something that organizations need to do, because even if you recruit women, if you don't appreciate difference, you're not going to retain them. And that's really important. And I think there still is the discrimination around parenting, thinking that women do all the parenting, that they're going to take time off to have children, and as a result, they're not going to be so focused on their work, etc. And even part-time working not being seen as someone who's ambitious because they're working part-time, which is totally incorrect. So I think, there's some rethinking. My niece recently entered a speech competition, and she said that the schools have not changed how they teach in 100 years, and the world has changed so much. I think a lot of workplace thinking hasn't changed in 100 years, and everything has changed so much. We need to get with the program.
Love that. There's some great perspectives in there, and yeah, the sponsorship piece is key. That appreciation of difference, diversity of thought. If organisations aren't moving with the current times, I think, like you said, they're missing out on such a huge target audience for their products, for their services, by just not bringing in that appreciation of difference. And it sounds so basic, but it actually is that basic and that simple. And I think your niece is also something there. We should get her up and get her to be and talk about how not supposedly but industry needs to have a huge jump forward as well. She might solve a few problems for us. Then it is really disheartening to hear that that so many talented women have these frustrations, and a lot of women, particularly in tech, are leaving the industry before they actually get to reach their prime, their full potential. And statistics show that 50% of women depart from tech careers before the age of 35, and often it's citing things like discrimination, lack of advancement for opportunities, and unsupportive work cultures as contributing factors. Why do you think so many women seek to leave rather than stay and drive change within their organisations to, create a better future for the next generation?
Well, it's exhausting. It's really exhausting. I've been there. I'm sure you've been there. That, day in, day out, having to sort of prove yourself, having to prove that you deserve to be in the room, trying to change perspectives when you are not in the majority group is really, really difficult. And we all have to prioritize our self-care. and our mental well-being, and it can take a real toll, especially if there's no confidants, there's no allies around you. One of the big things that I've noticed is that actually there are some great men, but they don't speak up. I've had female coaching clients and they've said, oh, this happened in a meeting. It was appalling. After the meeting, some of my male colleagues came and said, are you okay? But they didn't speak up in the moment. And this is what drives us away. If no one's speaking up in the moment, if I always have to fight for myself, I seem like I've got a chip on my shoulder. If I'm the one who's saying, oh, I don't appreciate your sexist comments, or please let me finish my sentence, I've got something to say here, or I'm the expert in the room, let me communicate. If I'm, or that's not funny, you might think it's banter, but it's not banter for me. I just seem like the miserable one, don't I, with the chip on my shoulder. But if my male colleagues actually said, yeah, that's not okay, I wouldn't like you speaking to my partner, my daughter, my mum, my sister like that. This is the kind of environment we are trying to create here. That would hold so much store, and that would take the weight of us. And I think we knew we didn't have to constantly fight our own battles on our own as a single voice, but we knew there were allies in the room who were going to actually speak up on our behalf. Wow, we'd absolutely stay, and cultures would change. So I think that's one of the reasons we leave, because we're on our own, the single voice, shouting and seeming like we are the difficult ones when we're absolutely not.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think allyship it is so important, and like we said, there are some fantastic male allies out there, and for any women that might be listening into the show today and thinking, I need to get an ally. How do I find an ally? I'm in this meeting room, I'm in this board meeting, and I'm being cut over, I'm not having my voice. Do you have any advice for women who take some practical steps to really kind of, those men are coming to them afterwards saying, hey, are you okay now? How do they turn that around, maybe to have that ally in the room rather than the outskirts on the outside? Have you got any tips for women listening in?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it is important to ask people to be an ally and speak up in the moment. I think that quite often people don't know how difficult we're finding it as women. I think they're shocked. They always say, oh, why didn't you tell us before this was so bad? We thought you were okay. So I think sometimes people don't realize how tough it is to be a woman in a male dominated environment, because we are being tough and we are, showing up as though we're okay. So I think it's about finding someone who you can be vulnerable with. And often you probably have had the nod from someone in the organization who does, in small ways shows their support for you. I would seek out those people and say, I'm finding it tough. I'm always the one saying this. Is there any way you can support me and be an ally to me in these situations? So it's not always myself. So that's what I would do. I would find those people who you just get a sense are on your side, and have a conversation and explain your situation and how difficult you're finding it. The other thing that came from the Obama administration that you might be familiar with is that the women, although they were in a minority, they clubbed together. So just say we were in a meeting together and Kelly, you have been spoken over. I would say, oh, I was really interested in Kelly's point. Can we let her finish it? So, us as women, we can come together, because one of the things, and I'm sure you've heard it, Kelly, is that women always say, oh, I've had a female boss and she was the worst boss and she didn't stick up for me. And because we have high expectations, I think, of other women in the organization, and sometimes they're finding it as hard as we are. But if we can find ways as women to support each other and be allies to each other, it's a great thing. Is it Madeleine Albright? There's a place in hell for any woman who doesn't support another woman. I think keeping that in mind always helps.
Definitely. I'm a huge advocate for women being aware of the allyship we play to each other on our journeys of taking each other to the top and making sure that we're left behind for those coming behind us as well. So some brilliant advice there, and thank you for sharing those thoughts. Obviously, before that, we just spoke about what organisations can do to why women are looking to leave. If we flip that down to organisations and looking at the retention side of things, because obviously we mentioned a bit before, we can do all the recruitment, we can bring them into organisations, bring them into leadership roles, and try and fix this broken run, but it's not an inclusive environment for them to be in and for them to thrive in, then retaining those women and all those minority groups, it's just not going to happen. They're going to leave because they're not going to feel like they should be there. So what do you think companies can do better to create this inclusive environment, to support and nurture their female employees? And have you seen any standout initiatives from companies that you might have worked with, or particular policies that have really kind of helped improve female retention rates as those women are moving up to first-time management and leadership roles?
Yes, I think there's many different ways to look at this. There's something in America they call the John Wall, which is, you walk into an organization and you see lots of photos of all the sort of senior leaders have been in the past, and they all look pretty similar. And that can just say to you, okay, I'm never going to make it here. So I think there's sometimes things about your environment, number one, just like, what does this environment say about who we want to work here? I worked with an automotive a breakdown company recently, and they said they find it really hard to find young women engineers because they have to do some work experience or internship or an apprenticeship in a mechanics office, mechanics garage, that's the place. And they often are not very conducive to women. They often still have pictures of half naked women on the walls, and they're just not great environments, and the young women don't stick it out. So I think the first thing is to check your environment. What is it saying? Is it an inclusive environment where everyone can thrive? Can anyone feel welcome here? Would you be happy if someone in your family was going to be in this environment, or would you not want them to be there? And what would it be telling them? So I think that's one area to consider. What does it actually look like? I think flexibility is really important, and we've seen that. So even if women decide to be, child-free by choice, they often might have caring responsibilities or other
Yep.
pursuits outside of the workplace. And making sure that flexibility is not a penalty, I think is very important. I think this is important for everyone, but I think it's particularly important for women, because I think if you decide to have children or you have caring responsibilities, I think organizations often think that you're no longer interested in your job, and that's not true. I think you are still committed and interested. It's just that you can't be there 24/7. So that understanding that someone might have a life outside, but that life outside can make them be a better employee, and that part-time, flexible, hybrid, remote, these things shouldn't penalize someone's career, actually. And I think they still do a little bit. We experience proximity bias. If you're not in the office, or if you can't go to the drinks after work where a lot of decisions are being made, yet you get left behind, or seen as someone who's not so ambitious. The other thing is that women get a lot more feedback on their personal style. I think it's in appraisals, women about 60% get feedback on their personal style. You should smile more. Oh, you need to show up differently. You need to not be so aggressive. Whatever it is, we get a lot of that feedback. Apparently, only 1% of men get feedback on their personal style. So the thing that I always like to say is flip it. Would you tell a man to smile more? Would you really? Or, would you tell him not to be so aggressive, or would you see it as passion? If you're going to give that feedback to a woman, make sure you'd give it to a man. And if you wouldn't, don't say it, because we end up contorting ourselves, tying ourselves up in knots, trying to be this perfect person that doesn't exist, because you feel that you have a license to give us feedback on our personal style. It's about, do we do a good job? Yeah, that's what you should be measuring us on. If we're good at our job, if we do it well, if we achieve the outcomes necessary, that's what's important. It shouldn't be whether, those other things that you decide to give us feedback on. So for me, those are a few things that need to be considered. And I also think a good thing would be if people were rotated more between line managers. Because I think you can get stuck with, what I call a barrier boss, a line manager who just doesn't really want you to go anywhere. Either they don't see the potential in you and just think, I'm really happy. They're happy because they're not saying they want to move on because you're keeping your head down and you're just getting on with it. Or they want to keep you there because you're so good and maybe you're doing 3 people's jobs and they'd have to replace you with 3 people if you went. So let's just keep them where they are. And I think that a single boss can stagnate your career. And I think more organizations could rotate managers. Actually, you'll have this manager for 2 years. Let's move you on to that manager. Doesn't matter if you're promoted or not, because someone else will see your potential when another person hasn't. And the last thing is also promoting and recruiting in batches. I think if you just recruit one person at a time, you don't always notice that you're recruiting very similar people. But when there's a batch of 10 people that you're recruiting and they are all male, or they're all have this similar education, or they're all from a particular ethnicity, it really shows up. And that happens whether that's recruitment or whether that's promotion. And it can really help you see something's not going right here. We've got to do something about this.
Great advice.
Sorry,
there.
I'm passionate. I go on.
No, that's absolutely fine. And you just reminded me, that's how we actually connected. It was on your Barrier Boss article that came out. And I read that, and I hadn't heard the phrase before, Barrier Boss. And I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, this just resonated with me so much. And yeah, that's why we're here today. But, it is such a crucial thing for companies who are in that fortunate position where they can offer some of these things like hiring batches or promoting batches. They're of a reasonable size, and rotating people around to different managers. I think that is such a key thing, because you see it so often how I speak to so many women and they're frustrated in the roles that they're in, and actually they're sitting under barrier bosses, and they could be barrier bosses that are men or women, but because it is such a fantastic job, they're just kept behind. And I think you mentioned something as well that really stood out to me, was being outcome focused. The personal style piece. Yeah, I've heard that. I've been on the end of receiving that sort of feedback, and 100%, I've not posted on their counterparts at the time. But if we're more focused on the outcome, things like the personality style, flexibility, remote work, the proximity bias should just be removed, because actually, can the person do the job, and are we doing it to the ability and the levels that the business wants? And if they're exceeding that and they need flexibility, then so be it. That's just what they need. And there's so many things in there that you shared, and I think there's some great opportunities for any organisations, hiring managers, HR, senior leadership listening in, to take some of that on board and just stop and think about your own teams, your own environments, and try and think about ways that you might want to take some of that on board. So yeah, thank you. And I think you and I could probably speak for days on some of these topics.
Yeah.
Well, many companies have DEI programs and initiatives in place, and if you looked at most of the large corporates now, I would be shocked to find a big corporate not having some sort of DEI strategy or person that managed it for them in place. However, some critics argue that these efforts can sometimes be a mere box ticking exercise, or a quota filling measure, or a nice kind of thing on their website that they can put out to show that they are doing something within the DEI space for all. How can organisations, in your opinion, move beyond tokenism and truly embed equity into their core values and practices?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question and a really important one. I think we're You're absolutely on the money when you say it can feel performative. It can feel like a tick box exercise. Let's do 2 hours of training, tick, we're done. And we don't have to think about this anymore. Let's go back to doing things as they were. I think one of the important things is a long-term commitment. If this could have been solved in 2 hours, it would have been done already. It's something that requires constant vigilance. You have to keep looking at it. You have to keep thinking what's working, what's not working, what's changed in our organization. And so monitoring the data and having an ongoing commitment to change is very important. I also think that it's not trying to do everything. Quite often, where you go in terms of trying to make change, has an impact on other areas. And so, not having this initiative overload, let's throw everything at it and see what sticks. But maybe let's focus on a couple of things this year, and let's then expand, see what's working, and see how we can build on it. I think that's really important. I also think listening to the voices of your staff is key. And many organizations have employee resource groups. They will have a lot to say on what needs to be done. They've got the lived experience of being in your organization, and doing something without speaking to them, I think, is a mistake. So how can you involve them so they understand, so they can feed into you, this is what's needed, this is what's not working, and actually let's do something about it. And I think, there is a little bit of a pushback with D&I, particularly in the US at the moment. And I think that's because we haven't involved everyone. So sometimes it feels like you're just focusing on women, or you're just focusing on people from ethnically diverse backgrounds. And actually, it's always about bringing everyone with you. So everyone has a role. When I'm talking about women, I'm talking about sponsors having a role in supporting women. When we talk about other groups, everyone can be an ally. And I think everyone needs to understand their role in that, rather than you win, I lose. Actually, we can all win. This is not the oppression Olympics. And yeah, it's, one of the things I write in my book, which people quote back to me most, is for everyone to win, no one has to lose. And, and I think that is the key. That is one of the keys that really helps us sustain the momentum around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Actually, it just expands the good stuff that happens. It doesn't remove any good stuff from anyone. And it means that the colleague that you have next to you will be able to be more productive, more helpful, more creative, help you do your job better. It doesn't take away from you. So in terms of your question, which was about actually how can we do it not in a performative way, it's really about taking everyone with you. It's about focusing on a couple of things, and it's about measurement as well. Knowing what your data is, seeing the progress, and seeing what else you need to work. When we engage with organizations, it's usually over a minimum of 3-year period, because we know things, the world doesn't change in a year. And over 3 years, we can really embed some new behaviours. We can really see change in people's roles, in what they're doing. And we know then, there's something much more sustainable going on that we can walk away from, and the organisation can continue.
Perfect. Do you think it's valid for the companies to really have a commitment that goes beyond, those performative measures that we just mentioned? Do you think having D&I as a corporate priority and as a key strategic priority for the whole organisation is something that organisations need to be doing? Because you see it so often, we're going to impact X, and we're not really all leadership, or we're going to do whatever it may be. Because it's not at that strategic level, it's like, well, we'll be hitting the next quarter. Tell you what, we'll roll that on to next quarter, or we'll make sure we move at the end of the year. And it seems sometimes that it can just get pushed on. And like you said, what's the saying? What gets measures gets done. Should organisations really having D&I as, really committed as a corporate priority?
Absolutely, it should be up there. The UN has sustainable development goals, and most organisations are committed in some way to those Sustainable Development Goals. One of them is reducing inequalities in the world. When you think about the social value and the social difference that organizations want to make, and I think any large organization has a CSR as well as a DEI area of the business, then actually this all aligns. If you're truly committed to reducing inequalities, creating strong institutions, then actually this has to be in the fabric of everything they do, really considering how do we, if women are not doing okay in society, then you have a problem, we have a problem. And if your organization is contributing to women not doing okay in society, then you should be taking that problem on. For me, organizations actually, in many ways, are more powerful than governments right now. They, people work for them, people are employed by them, people are influenced by business. Business has a lot of power, and I think businesses have the power to change the world positively. And so embedding DEI, embedding sustainable development goals in everything they do, absolutely will make the difference.
Perfect. And moving at the conversation on, we spoke a little bit about this already, around allyship. If we was to talk about allyship and the important role it has on driving positive change, would you expand on why allyship, particularly from men, but also from women, who mentioned it before, supporting other women is so crucial for the tech industry? And what does effective allyship really look like in practice?
Yeah, so I think allyship is very important because it's positive and practical. Too often when we talk about gender inequity, for example, people are thinking, well, I'm a good person. Isn't that enough? I don't go out of my way to be sexist. Shouldn't that just do the trick? Or people say, I don't know what I should be doing. But when we think about allyship, the positive and practical nature of it is really helpful. There is no shame and there is no blame with allyship. And there are also positive and practical steps that you can take to be an ally. It can start from things just, actually let me try and understand women's experience. The wonderful thing about the world now is there are podcasts like yours, there are YouTube videos, there are articles out there. If you want to understand the experience of a woman, you can find it. And so you can research, and researching and understanding women's experience, although you might never be a woman if you're perhaps not a woman doing that, will really help you. There are so many good books out there as well. So an act of allyship could just be maybe understanding the experience of women returners, understanding menopause, understanding what it means for women and their careers when they go to parental leave, for example, understanding what it feels like for a woman to work in a male-dominated environment, etc. So that's an act of allyship. Allyship can also look like speaking up in the moment when you hear something and you think, that's not okay to say. Something that, sometimes women hear things like, well, doesn't your husband earn enough? You probably don't even need this job. That sort of thing has been said to women before. And actually someone else saying, you wouldn't say, how much does my wife earn? This is not an appropriate thing to say. Or what do you mean by that? And I think there are really curious ways we can go about doing that. So I like the acronym TED, tell me more, explain, describe. So you could say, could you tell me a bit more where you're coming from when you say that? Or can you explain, what you mean by that? Or describe a little bit more where you're coming from. So do it in an inquisitive way. I think allyship in an inquisitive way works really well. Another thing you can do is separate intention from action. So it might be, when you mentioned, that person's husband's salary, for example, you probably didn't mean anything by it. But actually, I think we're crossing the line there, because however much money they have or their partner has is not any of our business. It's about, do they do a good job, and what do they deserve to earn for the work they do. So when you separate intention from action, that's really helpful, because the person hears you saying, you're not a bad person, and we know you didn't intend it, but actually you can do something different. And the third way that I actually like is, in a way, walking in the person's shoes. It could be, I used to say things like that. Think, oh, women just came to work for pin money and they were supported. But I've learned that that's really not appropriate. Many couples need both of them to earn in order to just live these days. And it's also just none of our business. So I've learned that I don't say things like that anymore. And you might want to think about the same. So you're not saying you are terrible. You're saying, well, I've been not right myself, and I'm trying to be better. And here's the insight and the learning that I have had. So allyship for me is very active. It's calling in, as I've just described, in 3 ways. It can be amplifying as well. Oh, they just said that. Yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea. And let's hear more about that. So these are ways in which you can be an ally.
Perfect. And I think the key thing for me with being an ally as well is you don't have to wait for anyone. You don't have to wait for your organisation to set up a program or anything else. If you want to be an ally, do it today. Do it right now after these podcasts that you're listening to. Go out there and think, how can I be a better ally to whatever group, whatever person it is that might be struggling within the organisation that you're in. And I think some of those tips that you gave, Ted Acne, can't tell the I really like that. Very simple, really effective, and easy to go out and use. And I just think if we can all be a bit more aware, educate ourselves, like we said, there's so many resources out there now. And the world will be a better place, and it will enable everyone to be better versions of themselves and do the things that they all should achieve and be able to do. So yeah, I really love that. Thank you for sharing. We're right at the end of the episode now. It feels like the time's gone super quick. But before we wrap up, could you share your 5 top tips or pieces of advice for our listeners? These could be actionable steps to help them become more effective, allies and advocates for gender equality in the tech workplace, or just general tech tips for women in tech navigating through their career into leadership.
Great. Okay. So I think I'm going to maybe repeat some things I've said, but the first one is definitely the flip it tip, which is actually, if you wouldn't say that to a man, don't say it to a woman. And I think that's a really good way for anyone to just stop in their tracks and think, actually, that probably, I'm not going to give that bit of feedback now because it's not appropriate to do. So the flip it, I think, works really, really well. The second is, in terms of allyship, it is about not waiting. It's not being a passive bystander in situations that happen. True allyship is when you decide to stand up and recognize your own power in a situation and say, I'm going to do something here. In this situation, I'm not in a minority. I have power and I can use my power with humility to support someone else. So it's really that speak up in the moment and don't wait. I think that the third one is for every woman, get a sponsor. Go out, look at your organization, find senior leaders there that you think might be supportive of you. You can go in first and just ask them to talk about their career journey. Say you're interested in navigating your career in the organization. What did they do to build their career? That's a really nice way to get in. Or another way is if they're interested in a project in the organization, you become part of that project to show you've got a similar interest and get to know them in that way. Or maybe they're the sponsor of your employee resource group. Find a way to spend time with a senior leader in order for them to sponsor you. Sponsorship is absolutely key. Now, in terms of 2 more tips, I think I'm maybe going to go a bit broader. And the first is actually, as an organization, think about how you can really stop stereotyping women. Stop limiting them. Stop thinking that women have to be super supportive, that they're not going to be interested if they're part-time, that if they're young women, that they're going to go off and have babies, and that's the most important thing. Let's stop stereotyping and let's actually just think, what do individuals require? True equity is about really thinking, actually, what does this person need to be successful here? It's not about having these universal rules that you just share with everyone, which means those who are minoritized can't be successful. So start taking an equitable lens and taking an individual approach to in order for people to be successful. And my last tip, I'm thinking about what that is. I think my last tip for you, for everyone, is actually to recognize that we are quite similar. And although I said appreciate difference, find connection and similarity. Because when we stop othering other people, when we stop thinking you're a woman, you're like this, or you're whatever, you're like this, when we stop othering people and see ourselves in others, that's when we can move forward. So I think that's my final tip.
That's great. And thank you for those 5 tips and all the other advice that you've shared with us today. There's so many great bits. I'm sure people have taken multiple little bits and pieces out of the topic and out of the episode in its entirety. So thank you for the thought-provoking conversation. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today and the listeners that we have here at Elevate Women in Tech. So appreciate you coming on board and giving us your time today.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, Kelly.
No worries. And for everyone that's listening in, please do tune in for Elevate Women in Tech and catch us next time for more empowering conversations, stories and perspectives from women in tech.